Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Energen's webinar on developing industrial energy management plan. My name is Jill Clark, and I'm the marketing specialist here at Energen, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Energy use is directly related to the cost of doing business, especially in the industrial sector. Reductions in energy use corresponds to the reduction in energy spend, and therefore can reduce overall operational costs and increase your bottom line. The concept of strategic energy management is to develop a plan which is continuously improving in order to maintain savings and find new opportunities. For the next 90 minutes, we're going to be exploring these concepts, some of these concepts and strategies and best practices for developing your plan. Today we have two speakers, Sarah Patterson, who is the lead energy management engineer from Energen, and Scott Zimmer, who is the CEO from Exact Energy. Their presentations are going to take about 45 minutes, and that's going to leave us about 30 minutes for questions. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout today's session, please type your questions into the question tab to the bottom right of your screen. We're going to be monitoring these questions throughout our session today, and we're going to try and answer all questions during the webinar. If we do not get to your question, we will follow up with you. Also, please use the chat window to inform us if you have any technical issues with the session today. The webinar is also going to be recorded, and the link will be distributed. Polls are also going to be conducted throughout the webinar to help engage you in the presentation and get a better understanding of your business needs. There's also going to be a survey at the end of the session that's only going to take about a minute to fill out. We want to ensure our sessions are providing you with value, and so your feedback is much appreciated. Finally, just for attending today's webinar, you qualify for a free 30-minute strategy session with one of our energy analysts. So please indicate if you're interested in this session on the post-webinar survey. So before I introduce our first panelists today, we are going to open up our first polling question. So you should see polling question pop up on your screen here. And so the question is, have you formulated a strategic energy management plan? And if so, where are you? We have a plan and we're executing. We have a plan, but it has not been executed. We don't have a plan, but we'd like to develop one. And finally, we don't have a plan. So if you don't mind just taking a quick minute to answer that question, I'm going to take a second to introduce our first panelist today. So Sarah Patterson is our lead energy management engineer here at Energen, and she is going to be speaking a little bit about exactly what strategic energy management is and kind of how it can be beneficial to your company. So let's give you one more minute to answer this question. So it seems that most people have answered that we don't have a plan, but we'd like to execute one. So as we get started, just before Sarah goes into her presentation, can you kind of comment on that a little bit, Sarah?
Definitely. I think that's a common challenge that a lot of folks face at a wide variety of different facilities. They understand it's important, but resources can be a challenge, timing can be a challenge. There's a wide variety of reasons why it hasn't been done, and hopefully we can help alleviate some of those challenges and make it easier for you to either develop one or find the right tools to help you develop one.
Excellent. Thanks so much for kind of clarifying that up, and I'm sure that we'll get into that a little bit deeper as we move forward with the presentation. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to take us through her section.
Thanks so much, Jill. Well, first off, what is strategic energy management? It depends on who you ask, and it can be anything to many different people. So strategic energy management, again, strategic, is a way to influence the way that your business is already operating to achieve goals that your facility has already identified related to energy. So for instance, if you wanted to improve your bottom line and you wanted to reduce costs, well, strategic energy management can help you get there. If you wanted to improve production efficiency or improve quality, again, strategic energy management can help you get there. So again, at different facilities, there's a wide variety of different reasons why people are interested in strategic energy management. So for instance, some folks decide that they want to follow that path because they are interested in achieving consumption savings. So for monitoring alone, you can achieve up to 15% savings on the cost side of things. Finance might be interested in money, maintenance might be interested in saving time, and management might be interested in improving getting some return on investment. So it's important to you. Why is it important at the North American level? Well, in different provinces, states, municipalities, and different grids across North America, most local distribution companies and organizations have identified that conservation is a very important part of their electricity mix coming up over the next few years. So for instance, Ontario's long-term energy plan forecasts that in 2032, 16% of Ontario's electricity provisions will be provided by conservation, meaning they want to make sure that we use 16% less electricity than we normally would to ensure that we're actually having a safe and effective grid. Sorry, it looks like we had a little bit of a technical hiccup there. So in making sure that that's important and that's functioning, that's important because it makes sure that the grid and the folks behind the grid are also invested. So this is important because it lets us know that there are resources out there, because it's not only in your best interest as a facility manager or production manager or any of your roles. It's also important at the North American level and behind the grid. So we know why it's important. How are you going to do it? So there's 5 questions that I'm going to ask, and we'll get some answers to and kind of walk through that path. But the first one being, where are you now? Now this is important because before we even start and before we do anything else, we need to get a good understanding of where you are. There's 2 main areas that we can focus on. The first is bills. What does your electricity consumption look like? What does your gas consumption look like? What are your utility budgets? Are you meeting those utility budgets? Do you have goals in those budgets? So having a bit of an understanding on where you are on the financial and consumption side of things is important. Also understanding demand and doing some trending of the energy and just getting a good understanding of where you are now, especially compared with the last few hours, days, months, years. That's an important process to go through. The next one, where are you now in terms of company alignment? So do you have goals and policies that could be implemented and aren't? Or do you have policies and goals that are being implemented and are being met? Have you had success in the past? Are there allies or champions who have been able to achieve some great savings and some great execution of projects? What was involved in seeing those successes? Were there a lack of successes historically, and what were some of the reasons behind those? So understanding where you are both from a financial and energy point of view and from a company point of view is very important. Now a tip is that being very critical at this step will save you quite a bit of time. Better to be a little bit critical when doing that belly button gazing at this point than to have someone else do that later. So next up, we know where you are. Where's everyone else? So again, this takes 2 main different areas. The first is looking internally and at your corporate information. So does your facility belong to a corporate group, or are there other facilities that have similar operations to you? Do they have similar trends? Do they have any key performance indicators that are maybe a little bit better than yours or worse? Do they have policies or procedures? Are there corporate goals or corporate directions that you're hoping to achieve? So again, doing a little bit of searching internally is often the best place to start. After that, there's public information, and this takes 2 different paths. When looking at public information, there's a few different options, but I'll give you a quick tip again, and the tip is a co-op student. I can't tell you how great co-op students are. I'm sure many of you already know, but co-op students are great at research, and they're often quite into this stuff as well. So co-op student going through and doing this analysis is often a very effective use of everyone's time, and making sure that they're gathering that information that you need in order to make some appropriate decisions. So in reviewing that public information, like I mentioned before, there's public databases, like Natural Resource Canada's Office of Energy Efficiency. They produce a wide variety of benchmarking guides for different industries. This is, for example, the Canadian brewing industry. There's a wide variety of different industries ranging from chemical processing to plastics manufacturing. So again, there's a wide variety of resources, and this presentation will be made available to you, and in it you'll be able to find the links and follow those to an industry and a benchmarking guide that is applicable to your facility. Another option is Simon Fraser's University has a great database of information. Again, links will be available to you and provides quite a bit of information about renewable energy, energy efficiency, and some of that stuff. So aside from databases and benchmarking, there's other opportunities, such as looking at other corporations and what they're doing. H&M, for example, has a wide variety of sustainability measures that they're pursuing. Things ranging from water efficiency to ensuring workers have a living wage to energy efficiency. In each of these goals, they've identified a target, they've clearly defined where they are, and they've clearly outlined steps that they're hoping to take to get there. So again, this is a great thing to read, and there's lots of other organizations that do this. On an industrial side of things, 3M has been a shining example of a facility and a company that is doing this. In Ontario, 3M was actually one of the first companies to become ISO 50001 certified. So they are a leader both at our provincial level, at the national level, and at the North American level in energy efficiency. They're looking at energy efficiency from a facility level, from a province level, and they're also looking at it from a corporate level. So again, you can access any of this information online. If you just Google 3M corporate energy policy, they'll give you a list of policy guidelines, goals, and things along those lines. So you know where you are. You know where everyone else is. The next logical step is to figure out where you want to be. So this can be a little more challenging sometimes, but identify and clearly define how your strategic energy management goals are going to fit in with corporate goals. How will they support your corporate goals? If your corporate goals are to increase the bottom line, well, then your strategic energy management plan, the goals probably shouldn't be on the marketing side of things if your facility goal is only to increase the bottom line. So again, focus your strategic energy management goals on things that the entire corporation can get behind, because this is really a strategy and a plan that will reflect and help and support your corporate goals. Another thing to consider is industry standards, whether those be ISO or other standards, but those can help you guide the goals that you're looking to develop. And again, competitive advantage. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break from this side of things and talk a little bit about what I would consider to be the best energy management mascot out there. This is a chambered nautilus. It's a little sea creature that lives in the deep, dark ocean, and you wouldn't often associate it with energy management. But if we crack it open and look inside, you'll see here that the chambered nautilus is just essentially an intricate pattern of shells that grows outward and outward. So when a chambered nautilus is born, or more appropriately when it's hatched, it's just a collection of these 4 little shells on the inside, these 4 little chambers. And as it grows, as it eats and grows and experiences more things, it will expand a little bit. And after each expansion, it will close off the chamber. And as it grows, it closes off more and more chambers, growing and growing and growing until it's much larger. The chambered nautilus builds off of its early formation, and this is really the foundation of the entire animal. So without a strong foundation initially, it could collapse and it wouldn't be very strong. So on the energy management side of things, I would consider it to be the same process. You want to start small and build your area of influence and build the projects and build the savings and make sure you're constantly achieving your goals. But at the same time, make sure that you're maintaining the existing savings and the existing progress that you've made, or closing off those chambers. So how will you get there? There's 3 main areas that I would focus on to address how you get there. The first is people. On the people side of things, you want to make sure that you're working with the right people. Do you have everyone engaged in developing the strategic energy management plan that you need? Do you have folks from finance, from operations, from maintenance? Do you have management? Do you have folks who have their feet on the street? You need a wide variety of people to get a wide variety of inputs. And through that, you'll build a much stronger plan. Next up is projects, and I won't speak too much about that because Scott will be speaking in much more detail. The last, but definitely not least, is procedures. This is what I would consider to be what closes off each of those chambers and what makes sure that you achieve that success moving forward. So what's next? Well, understanding, changing, and managing. You want to constantly be looking and understanding what is going on in your facility, changing or improving what's going on, and then managing to make sure that you are constantly maintaining what you have done while building on the success of the future. So I'm going to give you 2 success stories that I've personally dealt with that have been shining examples of success. The first is a processing facility. So at that processing facility, they started with management buy-in. And at that management buy-in, they knew that they wanted to make an impact. They wanted employees to be engaged. They wanted financial reward and savings, but they weren't sure where to start. They knew that their first goals were to make that impact with little impact. So they wanted to achieve savings and financial savings without impacting operations or impacting too much time and taking resources away from other areas. They knew they wanted to gain internal buy-in and sell the success to the other areas. So what they did was they started off with a group of team members. So again, the people who started this process were in the management level. So at the management level, the resources that they had available to them were people, money, and time. Through that, they were able to use those 3 resources to identify opportunities. And through identifying those opportunities, the people or the team were able to execute those opportunities and then sell them internally. By doing so, and by selling the first small project internally, they got buy-in of the facility and of different parts of the facility. So in doing those first few steps of that program and that project, they gained buy-in, and with that buy-in, they built bigger projects and bigger programs, and now the facility is saving tremendous amounts of energy and tremendous amounts of money, and they have a fully functioning team, which includes all members of the facility. The next example I'm going to give is a manufacturing example. And this was a slightly different situation in that there wasn't support from management at this facility when we first started working together. The support came all from operations and maintenance and people with their feet on the street and able to turn the dials and make the changes themselves. So what we were able to do is we started with the cheapest option available. We looked at site-level information. And by looking at that site-level information, we were able to understand what was going on and identify some larger opportunities. So through there, once we identified that opportunity, we looked at one specific process. And in looking at that one specific process, we installed monitoring equipment. We created a plan for action for what operators were to do in certain cases, and they were able to achieve a large number of savings and get a pretty good return on the investment in doing so. So they looked at that process level. They sold the process improvements up so that people at the management level were able to see what the folks were able to do, and through that, they were able to expand the program, and instead of just looking at one process, we now are looking at all of the substations. So in looking at all the substations, we're able to see further opportunities and execute on those. So again, in this example, the people started with the areas and the resources that they had control over. Those resources being equipment, timing, and execution of those projects. And then they were able to build and grow the team from there. So my advice to you in moving forward is to start with your areas of influence, make allies and energy friends along the way, and make sure that you're including as many opinions and ideas as possible, because that's only going to strengthen your program.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah, for that. So we should now all have a fairly good understanding of what strategic energy management is at a high level. So we are going to quickly go into our next polling question here. So you should see this popping up on your screen right now. What is/do you foresee being the largest challenge in developing your strategic energy management plan? Is it management commitment, employee buy-in, funding, resources, or competing priorities? So we're going to just give you one moment to answer that. And while you're answering that question, I am going to remind you that if you do have any questions, to please post them into the question tab to the right of your screen. We are monitoring the questions throughout the session today, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Finally, I do understand that there may be a slight delay in the slides showing up. Just to let you know that we will be distributing a PDF version of the presentation afterwards, as well as it is being recorded. So not to worry too much about that. It's not a huge delay, so I didn't want to stop the webinar or anything along those lines, but just so you understand that we do know that it's aware of that and that those things are going to be distributed after the session. So it looks like most people have had an opportunity to answer that. So it looks that about 50% of you are saying that it's competing priorities that are really kind of one of the biggest challenges that you're facing. So on that note, before kind of Scott gets into his presentation, Scott, can you kind of comment on that? Is that something that you see a lot of, and maybe what are some of the workarounds that you've had, or some good suggestions for some of these people facing this issue?
All right, thanks, Jill. Yeah, for competing priorities, first you need to understand what those priorities are and what's driving those priorities. A lot of times what we run into with competing priorities is it's mainly budget driven. We don't have the budget for it this year. So you need to understand what drives it so that you can look at energy as a way for them to achieve their goals, to make it a priority. Like, can you save enough energy so it then becomes a priority and gets put into budgets? It's all about what I find is that the management just doesn't know what the potential is and why should you invest in it. That being said, it typically comes down to the business case, and if the payback's there, it'll be implemented and it'll become a priority. So it's just how do you get to that decision-making level?
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Scott. So we're going to pass it over first to Scott to take us through kind of a more in-depth view of strategic energy management and kind of how to develop that plan.
Thanks. Yeah, so getting into it, how do we get there? So we put together this 7 steps to really walk you through how to start thinking about it. It starts really high level, then how do we get more detailed so that you really focus your efforts in the right spot. And it's typically a big plan. You have, especially in industrial market, you have a lot of energy consumption. How do we start breaking down the problem? Sometimes it's a daunting task. So what we start with is, just to go through the steps quickly, utility analysis, so we understand high level, how much do we consume per year, end use breakdown, how are we using each utility within the facility, high level energy savings to really give you what's the potential for savings, baseline monitoring so that we can go a little bit further with those energy savings so we can get more accurate, prioritizing energy projects, implementation and project tracking, and then followed up by continual monitoring. So it's really a full cycle there. So we'll get into each of these. So starting off with utility analysis. So utility analysis, you really start with analyzing the information you have. So you want to evaluate the cost of each commodity, and that would be electricity, water, and gas. Those are the standard ones. Excuse me. If you use other fuels like fuel oil or in some remote places, you want to evaluate that as well, or propane. But we really want to understand how much you spend on each of them, and then do a regression analysis on the utilities. In the regression analysis, you want to take into account your key variables that drive your energy consumption. So for industrial, you want like production output. For commercial, you're looking at occupancy. Occupancy is not as big of a factor in industrial, mainly production-based. And also weather, how's weather affecting that? And just so that you can really understand high level how much energy you use and how it's being used in your facility. And we'll get into the regression analysis in the next couple slides. But the tip here is that the highest cost utility should be the initial focus, as it will make the biggest impact from a conservation project potentially. It should, but if you're, once you get into it, you have to make the call on that, but typically you focus on the highest initial costs because then you make the biggest impact. So to focus on opportunities from the regression analysis, there's 3 common cases that come from the regression analysis, and you'll have a base load dominant, variable load dominant, and approximately equal base and variable. Now, getting into these in a little bit more detail, the base load dominant, as you can see to the graph, that the base load is a lot larger than the variable portion of it. So we have a lot of constant loads, regardless of what our variables are doing, so weather, production, occupancy. We're using a fairly constant energy. So this will help frame the philosophy of when you're trying to identify opportunities. So the opportunity would be automate to make those base load, make those variable because they're constant. Can we turn off equipment? Is there more efficient equipment? So that should really frame the mindset of when you're trying to identify opportunities. The next one is variable load dominant. So your load scales well with your key variables, which is good. So your opportunities would be to optimize existing variable control, more efficient equipment. And we'll get a little bit more detail later on about optimizing control and stuff like that. And then approximately equal base and variable, and it's a combination of the two. You really have to look for both, optimizing existing variable control, turn off equipment, more efficient equipment, and automate to make loads variable. So once we understand from a high level, we need to then move on to an end-use breakdown. We need to understand how each segment is being used within the facility. And to do this, an equipment inventory must be done, along with specific energy consumption details. And those details that we recommend, so the data to be logged when you're doing that walkthrough, is one, the current control philosophy. Because this plays a big part in energy saving. So is it an on-off control, and when is it on and off? Is the control variable, and what's the control variable in sequence? A lot of pieces of equipment have a control variable, but it doesn't really scale well with the energy consumption, so how can we really understand how it's controlled? And the other question is, what happens on the weekend or on off times or non-production? Because that's where we typically find a lot of wasted energy, that things are being left on that could be turned off. And then the other one is nameplate information. This is a crucial piece because it'll give you horsepower of a motor or of the equipment, which would be your rough energy or the maximum energy draw, water flow, your BTU per hour rating for like natural gas or burning equipment, make, model. You want the make and model so that if you need to look up more information, you have that stuff readily available. You don't have to go back to the piece of equipment. So once we understand how it's broken down, and we have that list, we need to do a high-level energy savings estimate on that list. And this will help identify where metering makes sense, help build the business case for an M&T system, so a monitoring and targeting system, because you'd understand how much you can potentially save. So if you could potentially save $100,000, you wouldn't put in a system that costs $200,000 because that doesn't make much sense just for a monitoring and targeting system. So it should really frame how much could you potentially spend on a monitoring and targeting system that's effective. And this should be completed by a qualified energy management professional that you could have internal or external do. And the reason I say this is because that estimate has to be reasonably, it's not 100% accurate, but it needs to be reasonable. You make reasonable assumptions. What can we save? Just make sure your calculations are correct as well. Because the last thing you want to do is build this business case for an M&T system or for projects and we overpromise because we said we're going to save a lot more than what we actually can, and then we underdeliver, and that's where an SEM program can really fall off the rails. So to complete this with a qualified energy management professional externally, you can look to your local utilities, see if there's incentive programs. So an audit would take care of this. A level 2 ASHRAE audit should help you with steps 1, 2, and 3, because it'll really give you the utility analysis and use breakdown, and then it'll also give you how much potential energy you can save. So once we understand the high level, now we can justify a monitoring system. So how do we get baseline monitoring so that we can really understand it at a more granular level, how much energy we can potentially save? And monitoring is a fine balance between cost and effectiveness, because the best system that you'll ever get is to meter everything, but the cost of that is very cost prohibitive. So you really need to be strategic in when we're replacing those meters to really keep that cost down. And the catch-22 here is identifying savings opportunities means monitoring energy, but it's the savings themselves that will justify the monitoring system. So how do we cost-effectively quantify how much we can save so that we can justify the monitoring system? So our recommended approach for this is we initially monitor high energy intensive loads and add the project-specific loads as energy savings projects are being completed. And the benefits of this is that if we focus on initial and high-intensive loads, we minimize initial costs because we're not installing too many meters, just enough to get us to a point where we can justify the projects. And there's also typically utility incentive programs to help offset this cost. And two, because we started with that baseline monitoring system and just on intensive loads, the infrastructure is in place where we can add project-specific loads to that system, and it also helps minimize the project cost. So when you're trying to justify a project, you don't have that cost of the complete monitoring system. It's just an adder onto your existing system, so it helps you there as well. So a tip. You want to review your electrical single line diagrams during the planning stages of an M&T system. An electrical single line diagram is a diagram showing how everything is connected. Sometimes it's a challenge to find, especially an up-to-date one, but I mean it's a great start because as you put in meters, you really need to understand what's on that meter so that you can get good data out of it. And also this will allow you to have an opportunity to see if you can consolidate meters. So why put in 4 meters? That 1 meter would be sufficient, because then you can help reduce that initial cost to get that justification in there. So once we have a baseline, then we need to start prioritizing energy projects. So how are we going to start actually seeing some savings? And so we want to focus on quick wins. And quick wins meaning, can we turn something off? Is it low cost or no cost, short-term energy projects? That's really what the quick wins are. So they can start to see, so we planned everything, we told them how much we can potentially save, now we need to start executing on this. So we want to get some quick wins to show them we can save some money from energy projects. And what this does, it really helps us gain confidence in your SEM program. So it really gets things pushed in the right direction. Just going back to that chambered nautilus, those are those first little chambers that you have there. That's what really builds that momentum to get to the bigger projects. And the other thing, so quick wins is what you want to do first, but you also need to think about large energy projects that need further analysis because they should be prioritized, but typically they need more detail. And something to keep in mind that is if there's no chance at implementing in the near future for the big projects, there may be a waste of time. Like if they're saying, well, we'll never do that for another 5 years, well, then you might not want to focus on that because you need the momentum to keep going with your SEM plan. So for the larger projects, we'll get into this a little bit, they typically need a more in-depth analysis for approval. And because it's a larger change and you have a larger expense, so you have a higher risk to the company. And a lot of times these larger changes can affect production if it's not done properly. And if you don't mitigate all the risks, that project's not going through. So it really needs a thorough analysis. And also, as part of these more in-depth analysis, we want to go with, you want to look at non-energy considerations as well, because many times that the projects go through for implementation is not because of energy, but because it helps something else. And these 5 things, so we'll start with mitigate health and safety concerns. So are we improving indoor air quality? Could we add sensors to make sure that there's more oxygen in the air? So that would really help mitigate any safety concerns that you don't have great indoor air. Can we fix a headache? A lot of people, our maintenance or plant personnel, have a headache that you can help fix with an energy project. A lot of times if there is a headache, there's energy being wasted. Is there a planned change coming up? Because this is the most economical time where you can really help, or this is the most economical time where you can make the design more efficient, and you're dealing with only the increased cost to make it more efficient. So it's a way to also maximize your energy efficiency budgets. 4, is there a productivity increase? So if there's a productivity increase, it really helps push the project through. And 5, are you helping support corporate goals? So if you're helping to support corporate goals, sometimes there's budget associated to help support those corporate goals. So you might be able to really get in that way, and to help management out, you make management look good as well. So now that we've prioritized the projects, now we need to really start implementation and project tracking. We have all these projects, and we need to make sure that they're prioritized appropriately, so that when they're implemented, we don't lose track of anything. So what we typically would do is track in the following categories: potential projects. So when we did the high-level energy savings estimates, we're looking for those energy saving opportunities. That's all your potential projects. What can we do? Approved projects would be the ones that you want to tackle within your certain period of time. Typically, they're annual goals. So those are approved projects. So we have all those approved ones for the year. Which projects we're going to start tackling right now? So those are the ones that go under projects underway. Those projects, so you might have some in the queue, approved projects, but we want to make sure that the projects that are underway get done, and that you can show the results, because that's what keeps your SEM momentum going before you start the next projects. I've been in plenty of plants where they want to do all 17 projects right away, and they don't get any of them done, and they're spread too thin, so nothing gets done, and then the SEM plan will fall apart. So really drive those those energy projects to completion so that you can really show and gain some great momentum with your program. So the other thing about implementing is that there always has to be a plan for measurement and verification, and they should be as outlined by the IPMVP standard. And IPMVP is the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol standard. It's a way. This standard outlines how can you statistically quantify your energy savings. A lot of times there's multiple variables that affect a process, or how can we accurately break out our energy savings. Well, this will outline a way to statistically quantify those savings so that you know you're actually seeing those, because a lot of times the finance person only sees the bill at the end of the day. Well, how much of that was savings? That's what the IPMVP standard will help you out with. A tip for this is that in the IPMVP standard, a simple measure you could use spot measurement. So like for lighting, for example. So if I went to a more efficient, more energy efficient light, you could measure before and after and calculate energy savings. But the one thing that doesn't capture is what happens if that light's left on. So regardless if it's more energy efficient, you're still wasting energy. That's where we would typically have it as continual monitoring to catch those cases. You don't have to do every single light, but just a way to understand if it's off or on, or how could that energy still be wasted? That's what you need to think about for that. And the complex measures should always be put on a continuous monitoring system. Complex measures take into account a lot of different variables, which we need to understand for energy performance. Once one of those metrics go out of spec to achieve that energy savings for any reason, your energy savings goes out the window. And so we've justified this whole project on energy savings, then something goes out of spec for some reason, and your whole business case goes out the window because you just wasted that energy. And I've seen it quite a few times where we've implemented an energy saving project and somebody wasn't really in the loop, so they went to change it back to the way you used to did it. Like, so we used to control it this way, but why isn't it controlled that way? Well, let's just put it back. Well, that mitigated your whole energy project. So you really need to ensure that that's continuously being monitored. So continual monitoring, a plan must be in place to ensure energy savings are continually achieved. And again, measures should have an automated threshold to alarm immediately when out of optimal conditions occur. This is the main benefit of a monitoring and targeting system, is that you can ensure that you are saving the energy, and if something goes out of spec, you fix it as soon as possible. I've been in one facility where they didn't realize something was out of spec. They thought everything was good, but they could have mitigated closer to $200,000 that year from just having a monitoring and targeting system, and it would have paid for the whole thing. But yeah, so they fixed it, got one in, and it was a great story. So we'll go into a few case studies. So we went through all the 7 steps. So the first is a Tier 2 automotive company. So the situation when we first met with them is they knew they had large energy spend, but they were unsure how to begin to help reduce that cost. So they established a green team with no energy management expertise, and what it turned out to be is a slow process. So they had greater than 6 months for a lighting change. And in a lot of industrial facilities, lighting is a very small piece of the overall expenditure. There's some facilities that have more, but typically they're in the 5 to 10% range. So what are you doing with the other 90%? So first thing is changing the mindset. So they hired an energy manager with the OPA funding, which is the Ontario Power Authority. This energy manager developed an SEM plan. They focused on some quick wins. So they had an energy study, or engineering study done. So it's 100% funded, OPA funded, which helped look at a large energy saving project. They implemented no-cost, low-cost actions. So they looked at what could they turn off, when was it being wasted, how could they change really marginal, or like it could even be equipment maintenance to help fix some problems, like change out a motor that needed to be replaced. They also implemented the lighting retrofit. So all of those quick wins, what it did is it helped justify a monitoring and targeting system. So in the engineering study also defined the required metering for the monitoring and targeting system, and the SEM plan identified major systems and additional metering required as well. So they used all that to really justify their monitoring and targeting system. And the other thing I want to get into is the impact of the engineering study. So they identified the potential for large energy saving opportunities. And it helped make a compelling business case for upper management. I find if there's not enough detail for asking for quite a bit of money, it'll always get turned down because you haven't thought everything through. So the engineering study helped build that business case. And after that study was done, it drove 4 other large projects. And the large project on average was greater than 500 megawatt hours in savings. So you're talking about $250,000 in savings with 5 projects. So you can really get some great savings, and at that level you can really help achieve your manager's financial savings goals. So it was really a good impact from that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is challenges we've had along the way. So we have a company that doesn't really, just starting to get in energy management. What challenges do we run in internally? So first one was purchasing. The challenge here was contracts involving the OPA incentive process. So they're very contractually heavy in some cases. They want to know how they're going to get paid, when they're going to get paid, what's their legal obligations. They don't really deal a lot with those types of contracts. So the solution was involve someone with incentive program experience so they can really ask all the questions they need and get a comfort level with how it's going to be delivered. And in this case, we involved the hydro company as well, which, because they're the ones paying out, they gave excuse me, they gave the client a comfort level with how they're going to get paid. And then the plant personnel. The challenge is we've always done it this way. Why are we changing? So the solution to this is we need to communicate early and often with plant and make plant personnel team members so that we can really engage them in the process so they understand what's going to be changed. And a lot of times what happens is they have some input that you could have built into the project to make their life a little bit easier. And you really have more of a positive implementation from an energy project that way. And then plant management was the last challenge because they're unfamiliar with energy projects and hesitant to approve. So how we solved this is we talked to management, heard their concerns, what do they really need to sell the project upwards, and then we addressed that through the project plan presentation. So we built that into the study so that you arm them with so all the reasons to say no, we need to change those to yeses. So that's what your engineering studies or your details should really focus on. So just overall, each stakeholder needs to be listened to and satisfied, and once that was complete, the outcome was positive. Large energy projects were funded and implemented, so it's a really good story for this one. And some examples for funding programs, these are the two that we deal with, is the Ontario Power Authority for funding, BC Hydro. A lot of states and provinces have their own. These are just two examples. And I typically have something for an audit, which helps with those 3 steps that we talked about. Detailed engineering study for the larger projects. Implementation funding, so to help make your business case more attractive. And then an energy manager, just to help have that professional in to help you out. And so check what programs are available to you, and always call your local utility if you're unsure.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Scott. Now, you'll see the the final polling question pop up on the screen, but I just want to kind of go back to our last polling question here because there was a really interesting kind of point that was brought up in our question window, is that we said that the majority of people seem to say that one of the biggest challenges that they kind of foresee in developing an energy management strategy was competing priorities. And it was brought up that competing priorities is sometimes a reflection of management commitment. So I just would like to ask kind of Sarah, have you ever had this happen with a client that you've been working with, and how have they been able to overcome, if there's a competing priority when it comes to kind of management commitment? Do you see that with your clients, and what are some things that they've done?
Definitely. It's a very common challenge. Like Scott mentioned, making sure that if there is a competing priority, if say funding is an issue and resourcing is an issue, and that's a priority, well, what are the ways that your strategic energy management can support that financial program and that process there? The other one is resourcing, and I know timing can often be an issue. I'm a big proponent of co-op students. Co-op students are worth their weight in gold when used effectively. So a co-op student, if you were to work with one co-op student, could implement a lot of these projects and do some of the dirty work for you. So that's a methodology that a lot of my clients that I work with have used very successfully.
Wonderful. So really looking at if you are having a hard time getting management buy-in, and there are competing priorities, looking at what are those competing priorities, how might a strategic energy management plan benefit those competing priorities to kind of help sell that And then as we now know, you're a huge fan of co-op students, so whenever possible, get a co-op student because they're phenomenal to help implement some of those strategies.
Absolutely. And one other note is that if you don't have the time, but there's money available from your utility, contract it. There's lots of people out there who are experts and would love to help you with this. And if there's money available and you don't have the time, someone else is going to use the money if you don't. So you might as well use it.
Wonderful. Okay, so on that note, we're just going to kind of go right into our last polling question here. So you, again, should see this pop up on your screen. So do you feel that a strategic energy management plan could benefit your company? And while you're filling that out, I do just want to remind you that we are going to head into our question period soon. So if you do have any questions, if you can please type them into the question tab to the bottom right of your screen, that would be wonderful. I am going to get Sarah and Scott to just kind of give a brief description about the companies that they do work for, just so you have a little bit of a better understanding of some of the questions that you might be able to ask them. And on that same note, just a reminder that the webinar is going to be recorded today, and so if you do have any questions after that, then you can definitely, we can answer those questions as well. So it does look like here we have about 90% of you are all kind of, we've convinced you that strategic energy management could very well benefit your organization. So that's wonderful to hear. So just to kind of summarize what we've chatted a little bit about today was that you should now have a really clear understanding of strategic energy management and how that can assist your company. And I should have some really good tools at this point to really help you get started. Something that we do at Energint is we have kind of a proven methodology of understand, change, and manage that we take each of our clients through to help them build their own individual strategic energy management plans. We understand that everybody uses energy a little bit differently, so this methodology that Sarah did touch on briefly is something that you should definitely kind of take a look at. And as well, just as a reminder that we do have a no-charge 30-minute strategy session with one of our expert energy analysts for you to chat with about any concerns or issues that you may have in your facility. Please take advantage of this opportunity as they are experts in their field, and this is a no-charge session just to chat with you about some of those issues that you might be facing in your organization. So on that note, we are going to open up the floor for questions. Again, we do have some wonderful questions coming through here. And the first one is, so for, and this is probably be another really good one for Sarah. So talking about strategic energy management tools, ISO 50001 is a good framework to help, and there's others that are out there. Do you think that an energy management an energy manager is a tool on its own? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a tool like ISO 50001 on top of a certified energy manager? Energy manager at a company.
That's a mouthful. So I guess two questions in there. One, ISO 50001, yes. Yay or nay? The second question is an energy manager as a tool. So we'll speak about ISO 50001 first. As most of you are aware, ISO 50001 is the energy management program that ISO has put out. It follows a very similar process to 14001 and some of those other quality ones that you're probably all very well aware of. My personal opinion is ISO 50001 is a great framework and great methodology. I think that you can follow the framework and methodology without ever applying for certification, and that in itself could be a good process. There's obviously benefits with being certified and all of that as well, but I like the process that they have employed, and I would recommend following that process. On the energy manager side of things, definitely. A certified energy manager internally to your organization is a huge resource. Depending on the size of your organization, they could do something as ranging from walkthroughs and you know, implementing the programs and projects themselves to managing all of the many different pieces that go into a strategic energy management plan. Again, depending on the size of the organization, they could be someone who turns the dials, or they could be someone that manages a portfolio of programs. So I think it's a huge resource, but having a strategic energy management plan and a certified energy manager internal to your company are not mutually exclusive. I think that it's important that if you do have someone internally working on energy initiatives, they need to be part of a team, whether they be leading it or supporting the team. But energy management is a team effort. It's not a solo activity.
And on that same note, we've talked a little bit about management commitments, and Scott, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit to this as well. But what if I'm a smaller industrial, or I don't have quite the right level of management commitment to actually get an energy manager into my facility on a full-time basis? Are there any incentive programs or resources out there for me to get a part-time energy manager or something along those lines?
Yeah, so if you don't qualify for a full-time energy manager, they have roving energy managers that work for the hydro companies, so they'll be in charge of multiple facilities. I know Toronto Hydro has a handful or a full team of them that you can really get to come in to help you out, help kickstart that. So I think that's a great way.
Perfect. So a good way to kind of sneak an energy manager in there without having to get the full commitment of maybe a full-time employee coming on in that regard. Perfect. And kind of going off of that, when are we going to start seeing some incentive programs for conservation, do you think, coming from provincial governments?
Yeah, I think we're seeing quite a bit already coming from Ontario, definitely BC a number, Saskatchewan's bringing a bunch out, New Brunswick has done a whole lot of work, Nova Scotia is doing a lot on the residential side of things. They're invested because they have to be. It's in their best interest.
Perfect. And just before we kind of go on to a few other questions, I want to quickly kind of ask Scott, can you explain a little bit about Exact Energy and what they do, just so that we can give some of the people on the call a really good understanding of some of the questions that they might be able to ask you as well?
Yeah, so at Exact Energy, what we do, we really help do large-scale industrial projects or large commercial. So we go in, we offer a free site walkthrough to really help identify where you can save big energy savings. What we look for with that is, we're a new set of eyes to really look at where you could potentially save and ask those questions. And we've been in automotive, plastics, food. I've been at steel plants. So we've really been in the full gamut of an industrial, and our team has 30-plus years experience to help with that in energy management. So what we do is really try to focus on the big projects that really need the detailed analysis to build that business case to sell it to management, and that's been a great part of our success to date. Yeah.
Perfect. So any kind of industrial project-focused questions or some things that you can kind of answer.
Yeah, just how to get them approved, implemented, where to start. So we really do project identification right to implementation. So.
Wonderful. And Sarah, can you tell a little bit more about kind of what Energent does and kind of our areas of expertise?
Definitely. Well, there's a number of areas of expertise. We range from working with one large manufacturing facility to multi-site commercial to institutional facilities, so we run the gamut. The services that we offer are, we offer a software as a service, so we have a system that allows us to monitor and measure energy. We're able to alert on out-of-bound conditions like Scott spoke about, so that you can ensure the integrity of the energy management plan and that you're constantly achieving savings that you've fought hard to make. We also help identify opportunities. We're a resource for our clients. So really what we do is we're the support system or the backup. We're the guys that you call if you need help and you're not sure where to start. We can help identify opportunities. We can make sure you maintain them, and we can help answer your questions.
Wonderful. So that actually is a great kind of segue into this question that just popped up here. So is it best to put the monitoring system in first before I get started on all these programs? And if so, is there funding available specifically for monitoring and targeting in my facility?
Oh, yeah. There is funding. So as Scott mentioned, the OPA, or the Ontario Power Authority, offers a number of funding opportunities that are available through your local electricity distributor. So that's in Ontario. In BC, same story. And in most provinces and most states, again, the same story. So my advice is talk to your account representative first at your utility, whether that be gas, electricity, water. Often they can help you. My personal opinion is start with a lower cost option, and that often is site level. Looking at site level before going through, and as Scott said, implementing metering across the entire facility, because that can be incredibly costly, incredibly time consuming, and you want to spend your effort initially saving energy. And to do that, we need an initial investment in the monitoring and targeting system, but don't go full gamut right out of the gate.
Perfect. And so are there any tools or any systems that you can, monitoring systems that you can recommend that are for individual load levels at all?
As far as metering at individual loads, well, our system is able to do that. There are a number of others as well. A lot of people will put meters on systems, and that's a great start, but you need to make sure that you're doing something with that meter. Once you've got a meter installed, don't leave it there and ask that, you know, once every quarter somebody might go in and dust some dust off it and look at it. It needs to be part of a system, and it needs to be part of a plan. So if you are monitoring individual pieces of equipment, make sure you have access to that data.
Excellent. And kind of, Scott, you spoke quite a bit in your presentation about kind of quick wins. Can you give a few examples of what some industrial quick wins might look like?
Yeah, so a lot of quick wins that we find are in the startup and shutdown of equipment. So a quick win, we should be looking at when is maintenance starting stuff up? Why are they starting it up? Could they hold off a little bit to start it up? Like, what's the minimum amount of time? Because you can really get some energy savings just from that. So you're playing around with schedules, so that's really no cost. So that's a very quick win to get some measurements on. Do a weekend lights out audit. So what's happening on the weekend? So you can always find computers left on or some lights that are left on all the time. So you monitor it. Those are really no cost quick wins that you can look for. So that's what I typically start encouraging for those initial quick wins, and then the other stuff, it's like an improper use of compressed air. So could we change out, a lot of people will clean stuff off with compressed air. Well, do you need that for compressed air usage? So could I change that to a blower, and you save a lot of energy. So there's really low cost for buying like a compressed air gun, but the amount you save is quite a bit. So
perfect.
Just little things like that.
So there's a ton of things that people can do that they may not even need management approval for. It's just really very slight operational changes that are just going to make the facility just that much more efficient.
Yeah, and then once you quantify that, that's what really gains, like, oh, I am affecting that, so let's change it, and it's great.
Perfect. So another really great way, as we're kind of circling back to that management commitment piece of things, to kind of gain that management commitment and employee buy-in, and helping with the kind of some of those competing priorities and everything. And I'm not sure who this question is for, but we have a question that's come through here. Do you perform multi-factor regression analysis? So yes.
Yes, you do.
Yes to both.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you need to take into account production and weather, because you definitely need multivariable regression analysis to do it accurately.
Perfect. And we have got a good question that has come in here, that we're not an industrial company, but we do have a number of mid-sized commercial properties. Is strategic energy management appropriate for us, or is that kind of an overkill? And are there any fundings outside of the industrial world? So Sarah, I'll kind of let you kind of take this question, I think.
Oh yeah, again, I believe in strategic energy management for anyone that has an electricity bill. It can be especially lucrative in your situation because some of the opportunities might be lighting and HVAC related, which are often lower cost to implement than in the industrial world. So commercial, definitely, there's lots of opportunity to do benchmarking internally and look for different opportunities that way. Quick answer, yes, you should do it.
Excellent. And there's a lot of incentive programs available for them as well.
There are.
Outside of Ontario, as well as, I'm assuming, in Ontario.
Yep. Again, BC, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. There's quite a few in Michigan. Yeah. California is very big on commercial efficiency.
So when in doubt, just contact your representative at your utility, and chances are there's some incentive programs either available or on their way.
Definitely. If you spend enough that you're concerned about your utility bill, your key account manager at that utility wants to help you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And can I just throw in one?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If you're going to contact your local utility and you have multiple sites like that, tell them about the multiple sites, because the bigger amount of potential energy savings you could get across those sites, the more willing they'd be to help you out. And that could be the difference between hiring an energy manager or not, because if you put all 5 sites together, you could get an energy manager for yourself. So that's just an example.
Perfect. And just also, you know, a lot of us are really busy, and we facility managers don't have all the time in the world maybe to contact their utility at every point in time. Is this something that Energint and Exact Energy can help out with as well, identifying some of those utility opportunities?
Yep. We offer a free site visit if you're a large commercial or industrial user. That's what we go in just to help identify where we can get big savings, because then we can help navigate through the incentive programs for them.
Perfect. So that's really what you guys do, is help navigate through that kind of cumbersome incentive program process with utilities.
Yeah. That's sometimes it's a long process, and if not done right, it's very painful.
Perfect. And Sarah, you have Energint has some experience in that as well?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit of experience.
Yeah.
Perfect. So another question here is, Scott, you had talked a little bit about kind of an engineering study that is done, kind of the first thing that you do when you're building that strategic energy management plan. Are there anything, sorry, just a quick question was, are there any things internally that we should do as a facility to prepare for that for that engineering study?
Just to take kind of like a side step,
yeah.
You really want to, that was the case for that one, for that one facility, that's how they got their SEM program kicked off. It depends on what your management or where you're currently at. So an energy engineering study might not do the same thing for your facility as it did for them, but for that engineering study, I'd say just contact, because it needs to be done by a third party to get the funding in Ontario. So I'd contact them, because they'll really give you a case-by-case basis. If you're doing a detailed engineering study, there's metering that has to be set up, so we really want to help minimize that cost. So to get prepped, I would just contact the person that you want to complete the study, and have them in so that they can really help guide you through that process, because it really can change on a case-by-case basis.
Excellent. And Sarah, I think this might be a really great question for you. Have you seen any, obviously, kind of green teams or building a sustainability culture into an organization might be really important. How have you seen some companies that don't have an energy manager, don't have a green team in place, kind of start that process internally of building a green team or building a culture of sustainability within an organization?
That's a fantastic question. It's not done overnight. It's hard work. The ways that I've seen it done most successfully is understanding your facility and your company's culture and working within it, not fighting against it. So if team meetings are something that's really important for each of your different groups, maybe embedding or including a sustainability section in that team meeting rather than, having a handout or a pamphlet. Mm-hmm. Also, walking the walk is really essential, and making sure that you're getting buy-in through each level and each group that you're working with. It's about building allies, and you can have members of your energy team doing great things, but your facility really starts seeing the benefits when everyone takes accountability for these kinds of things and when everyone understands. So a communication plan to employees and to team members is really important, because they can understand why you're doing something and why it's important. For instance, one facility we worked with was going through a number of lighting retrofits, and they were testing different lighting measures and trying to go about that process. And they knew that a certain light was going to save them quite a bit of energy, but the employees didn't like that one specific light because they couldn't see things as well, and it met all the standards that it was supposed to, but they just didn't like it. Well, instead of going with that light and making all of the team members upset about, the stupid energy program, they opted to go for a light that was slightly less efficient. And the entire, well, maybe not the entire, but everyone I spoke with that was working in that area loved the new lighting level, and they loved the lighting color. So they made some adjustments, and they got half of their team members on board. So getting a few hundred people on board by saving a little bit less electricity was a great way for them to make sure that they were getting team buy-in, and then that team is further able to find opportunities and do even better things.
Perfect. So a lot of, and that almost takes us into kind of our last question, which is how can I really increase employee engagement? So you almost kind of answered that there. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more at all.
I'm pro-engagement. Yeah, I think the more people you've got in your corner and the more people working on energy programs and fixing problems essentially and saving money is going to help your organization. So whether that's through a communication program to your team members, which I think is very important, or through soliciting feedback and looking for opportunities, that's a great way. But you need to make sure that when you're asking people for feedback, that's not just a step that you're going through. You're also able to engage people, and if you ask for feedback and you get some great suggestions, well, what's the next step? Do you implement them? If you don't implement them, how do you communicate that to people? That's not something you're going to be implementing. So having a very clear and transparent process is really important as well.
Wonderful. So I think that kind of takes us to the end of our question period here. You will see my contact information on the screen right now, so if you do have any additional questions for either of our presenters today or any questions in general, please shoot me an email and I will connect you with the correct people. Again, a reminder that if you are interested in the no-charge option to chat with one of our energy analysts, just to please indicate so on the post-webinar survey, and we will be in contact with you shortly. So thanks again, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your Thursday.